Welcome to the Atheist in Recovery podcast, where we talk about finding hope in recovery. And now your host, Dr. Adina Silvestri.
Hello, guys, and welcome to episode 26 of the Atheists in Recovery podcast. And today's episode is longer than normal. It's about an hour long, and I thought about making it into 2 episodes, but I decided against it. And so hopefully you can find some time to listen to this in its entirety. The guest today, she's very well known in the recovery lit community, and she talks about being a devout atheist Jew, which is something I had never heard of before. And she's passionate about it, so there's definitely some F-bombs being thrown around in the episode. So if that's something that you're sensitive to, I just wanted to alert you to the F-bombs and the length of the episode. It's not our normal 30-minute episode. But I thought that she's a really great storyteller. She talks about her higher power being Jimi Hendrix, where her atheist comes from, and it goes all the way back to Nazi Germany. And so anyway, I hope that you like this show. On to our guest, Dory Olds. Dory Olds is an award-winning writer whose work has appeared in 8 book anthologies and multiple publications, including the New York Times, Marie Claire, and Woman's Day. She is a contributor at The Fix. She's currently working on 2 books, including a memoir. Okay, guys, let's get started. Dory Olds, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. So I thought we would start our conversation by inquiring about your spiritual background from childhood.
Oh, great. I love to talk about that. I'm from New York, and when I was young, I would listen a lot to adult conversations, but I was sneaky, like any good drug addict, and I would listen and watch and listen and watch, and I absorbed a lot. I like to tell people that I skipped 2 grades and went to college at 16, so I understood an awful lot. And my parents liked to entertain a lot. They would have friends over. And my father often talked about World War II. He was an army captain in World War II. And he called it a just war, like justice. And it's where he became connected to his tribal feeling of Judaism. But I am from 3 generations of what I call devout atheist Jews. I made that up. It's kind of to amuse myself, because many people do not understand how you can be atheist and Jewish. And I mean, there's secular Jews, which are non-observant, but atheist, I feel like, is a little stronger. And my father had very strong opinions, and he became very animated. He was a great storyteller. And he would say, religion was created to control the masses. Poor, dumb bastards manipulated by their own fears. He felt, there's some famous quote like that probably read somewhere. Yeah. But it's, I am so glad he didn't live to see Trump, because it's so true that when people have a lot of money, they like to have worker bees.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that, your father's view of religion, how that formed your identity early on.
Okay. So not knowing I was listening, he told some amazing stories of World War II. I mean, he talked about the day that the prisoners were freed at Dachau.
So he was a
army captain.
A colonel?
He was a captain.
Captain.
He was like hot shit, And he would talk that way, like he would stand up straighter, and he would command the room when he told these stories. And people had rapt attention, including his little sneaky Dora Sue. That was me, Dory. So he would talk about when they drove to Dachau, the town of Dachau. Everyone in the town must have been able to see the smokestacks. And he said the smell was unlike any other. It had almost like rotten meat. And the townspeople went about, mowing their lawns, having their chats, milking their cows or whatever they were doing. And that made a huge impact on me and turned me into an activist, in these past 3 years. So he would talk about, that was his first impression. Then they drove to the concentration camp at Dachau. And he said when they first entered, he thought he saw stacked, he called it cordwood, and it turned out to be bodies, dead bodies. They were so thin, it looked like wood. And then when he got inside the camp, people were naked and out of their minds. They were like walking around dazed. And then some were clothed and some weren't quite as out of it. And he said that he and the other men, even though he was the captain, the war had just ended, and he was there more to see it and thrilled that they won. And they witnessed a guard being beaten to death by a bunch of Jews crowded around a guard and beat him to death. And none of the Americans stopped them. And he would tell these stories. And I knew my father was a really good man. I mean, even though all kids think their father is great, their mother is great. Well, not all kids, but a lot of kids. I did. I thought my parents were perfect. So to hear him talk about that was amazing. And it made such an impression.
Yeah, that must have been so traumatic to see. I can't even imagine what that was like for him. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your journey with addiction. There are many articles out there that you've written, and I'm a big fan. And so I'm going to reference one of them. You talk about your start with addiction at age 11. And you said you had your first joint with camp friends, and then you moved on to alcohol and amphetamines, acid, cocaine. Can you paint that picture for us a little bit more?
Yes. So at age 11, we were visiting family friends, and two of the boys were like closer to my age. They were a little older, I think. Well, one of them wasn't. One of them had been my camp boyfriend. I had no idea there was going to be pot. And I don't know where my sisters were, but they weren't there. We were in the basement, and a joint started going around. And like, as I said, I think earlier, I'm very observant, and I was like a sponge. So I watched, I understood, but I was scared because I didn't know how to do it. I wasn't scared of drugs. I was scared that I would cough, that I would make a fool of myself, that I would look stupid. I was very self-conscious. And it went around, and sure enough, and I watched how people did it, and I watched the ones that coughed and the ones that didn't cough, but I coughed. Oh, it was terrible. But then it went around again. And to be honest, I didn't feel any change. So I didn't see the big deal of it, but I loved this sneaky behavior of it. I loved that it was hidden from everybody else. We were like doing something no adults knew. I was the youngest, and my older sisters weren't around. I don't know where they were at the time. They must have been upstairs. I don't know. And yeah, so that was the beginning. And then right around that time, I was in a class where it was an open classroom experiment of fifth graders and sixth graders together. And we used to do this thing where we would hold each other so tight that like you hold your breath. Somebody squeezes you so tight till you kind of pass out. And I think that was like the beginning of my learning about escape. And then in fifth or sixth grade, my best friend and I at the time, we read Go Ask Alice. And I think most people would have been disturbed by how this runaway kid, she was in terrible way after she did LSD. She scratched and scratched herself thinking there were bugs. If I remember correctly, she locked herself in a closet because she was babysitting and didn't want to hurt the kids or something. But to me, it sounded spectacular. And I think that might have been the beginning of my wanting to be bad, like just bad. I became attracted to this wild crowd. I was from, a very good family, cultural, smart, college educated, making money. My mother was a stay-at-home writer. My father was a manager in radio who worked himself up from, radio newscaster and up and up. He was on the first TV soap, I think, or was it radio soap? Anyway, so those bad kids, boy, was I out of my element. When my grade school merged with 2 other grade schools into junior high. So when I went into 7th, I met kids that were from completely different backgrounds than mine. And it looked like glittery and shiny to me. They mouthed off to teachers. They could come and go as they pleased in their homes. They weren't monitored, really. Plus, it was the 70s and people were lax and drugs were everywhere. So that began the drinking. And I hated beer, and wine made me a little sleepy. But as a Jewish kid, even when I was young, like 11, 12, you could sample drinks at bat mitzvahs, older kids. And I was bad to the bone. I mean, I just was so curious, but it was almost like I was researching for a movie.
You were doing your research. Yeah.
Yeah. But it got a hold of me. It changed. It was like the sound of a pinball machine. Bing, 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 bing. Like everything lit up in a way I had never really known. And all I wanted was more, more, more. Mm-hmm. And by 15, I wrote in my journal, I have to stop drinking. That was like a rare moment of clarity. And I actually, at 17, I'd left, I ran away at 15. I found my higher power, I guess. My parents did not believe in God. They didn't believe in ghosts or afterlife. But I had a thought, maybe there's ghosts, maybe there's afterlife, maybe there's reincarnation.
Yeah. Well, no, not to interrupt you, but I was going to say, when you grow up as a devout atheist and, your parents obviously are, do not subscribe to a religion or a dogma, how do you find yourself? Like, where does that identity come from?
I read a lot. My father was, like I said, a million times, was in radio, and he would come home with promotional copies. It said not for sale. They were promoted to be played on the radio, and he would come home every night and we would run to him. The thing is we were not allowed to talk to Dad until he had some quiet time, and he would read his mail and have his drink. And like bringing him his drink was quite an honor. And like the sound of the clinking ice cubes he drank brandy, he drank scotch, but he was not an alcoholic. He had a strong relationship with alcohol, but he was a very controlled, regimented man, completely organized, high functioning. I maybe saw him tipsy once at a party, but that's it. He was always he just seemed so contained. But those records, you got to remember, I was born in 1961. So I'm like the tail end of the boomers. And so I'm talking about we lived in Long Island from 1968 and I was there till I left. So it was from age 6 to 16. At 15, I ran away, but I was caught. And that's a good thing, but we'll get to that. So a lot of it was through the culture and the music. And, we would go see plays. My family was very cultural, very sophisticated. The New Yorker, the cartoons, they would explain things to me. My parents did the New York Times crossword puzzle every day. I couldn't do it. I still can't do it, which annoys me. I mean, they were very literary. I had tons of books and I watched movies and I just was a sponge. I just soaked it all in. But I remember when I was about 6 or 7, I had my best friends next door. I hated being the youngest 3. I had 2 older sisters. And they would always say, oh, when you're older. And it was like, I couldn't do things until I was older. So I wanted to be older. So there were next door neighbors who were younger than me. So I hung out with them all the time. I loved it. I was like the big sister. And we would often watch that claymation program. You're probably too young to know about it, but it was Davy and Goliath. And it was a Lutheran church program. And in every episode, it was claymation, which was so cool to watch. And every episode had some kind of moral to a story. And it was fun to watch. And we watched it. And one day I came home from a sleepover over next door, and I said something about God to my father, because in the program, Davy knows about God and they talk about God, and like, I just didn't know what it was really. And I said something about God, and my father said, "Where did you get that? How do you know that word? Who have you been talking to?" And it was like,
Wow.
Yeah, he was shocked and surprised. And I immediately got that he did not like that word. And so that was maybe the beginning of him talking directly to me about his feelings, that God is a made up fantasy for people that want to believe that there is order to the chaos. There is no order. It's chaos. And, I'm lucky that he explained all those things to me, because I'm glad about that. I went through periods where I investigated other religions, and especially in AA, because there was such a strong Christian sound to it. And even though at the beginning they say, you can believe your higher power can be a doorknob, it could be a chair. And I'm like, what? Are these people high? Like, I didn't get it. But there were phrases like, the hoop you have to jump through is wider than you think. You can believe anything. So I took that at face value, only to find out later that it says, that there are some people who are too stubborn. Like, I think it's in the We the Agnostics. It ends with, and may you find him, with a capital H, and may you find him now. And, so I was scared. I wanted to be sober. I didn't know any other way.
Right.
Yeah. So I started going to other, investigating. And
You were investigating.
I went to a church that was near my house. It was called Our Lady of Pompeii. I'm talking about, I jumped way into adulthood.
Yeah, let's go back, actually. I want to go back to the first time you sought help. And so in the article that I referenced earlier, you say that you come out of a blackout on a cot in a detox unit with no memory of how you got there. And you were around 26. Talk about your feelings surrounding that.
Okay. That's where the art came in. I had a habit of 3-day benders. I drank and did coke, and it got worse and worse. And I came out of a blackout at age 26. That's before the blackout in the rehab. And the blackout was when I lived on McDougal Street, 26 years old. For 2 years, I had really understood I had a problem. Kept trying so hard to control it and kept failing. So I woke up out of this blackout, and I had ripped my portfolio to shreds. And I didn't have much money. I had spent money putting that together. I was very proud of my artwork. I was in Parsons School of Design. I graduated and wanted to be an artist. And I loved my portfolio. And I thought, why did I rip it up? And I ripped it into pieces and gouged into as if you held a pen, with a fist, and stabbed it. It said rock lyrics like, I'll meet you on the next world and don't be late. That's one of my favorite Jimi Hendrix lyrics. And it had Dazed and Confused. That was a Led Zeppelin. Oh, and there was another Hendrix lyric, there ain't no life nowhere. I had a long history of suicidal behavior, which actually ties in with the eavesdropping about the Nazis, but we'll get to that. So, I woke up out of a blackout, and I'd done that, and bugs were scurrying. I didn't have bugs.
Right.
They were scurrying across the bed. I had done enough LSD to know it was a hallucination. And I had been watching reruns of Mary Tyler Moore, and the TV had turned to snow. It used to do that at 4 a.m. They would have all these reruns, and the TV was snow, and I was having auditory hallucinations, and I saw a tarantula on top of my dresser.
Wow.
Now, I know that in New York City, there are no tarantulas. So I closed one eye. I closed the other eye. It was still there, the same. And I thought, I wasn't scared of dying. I wanted to die, but I was scared of losing my mind and being locked up, scared of being completely mad, which I was very close to, I think.
Wow.
I was already muttering to myself out loud, like all the burnout cases in the village, people who had been speed freaks. They were very weird characters, the street people. And I was starting to catch myself muttering out loud, like, that motherfucker, I'll show him. Anyway, so I called, my cousin had been to rehab, and she had said, you're so lucky, Dora. You can handle alcohol, you can handle drugs, but it is progressive. So if you ever get to a point where it's a problem, I'm the one to call. And she was my cool cousin who I loved.
Cousin.
Yeah. So I called her, and it was like reaching across, like it seemed so far away to get to the phone, past these overflowing ashtrays, past the mess I had made of my portfolio, and the realization that I was mad, like mad as a hatter. And I called her and I said I needed her. And she lived in New Jersey at the time, and I was in Greenwich Village on McDougal Street between Bleecker and West 3rd. And she got there, it seemed like minutes, but it was about an hour. So it would have been the early morning. I would have been very frightened that my best friend and roommate would know, because I promised him so he wouldn't leave. We were best of friends, like brother and sister. And he had threatened to leave if I didn't stop. And she got there. Everything was happening in warp time. And she said the weirdest thing when I called her. She said, do you have any, alcohol left? I said, yeah. And she said, oh, go ahead and drink it. And she said, do you have any Coke left? I said, yeah. If I scraped out the packets, that was like the desperation, scraping out the packet. And she said, well, go ahead and do it. Now, I thought later that she used psychology. But she said, no, I just figured it's your last hurrah. Have some fun.
Oh,
isn't that crazy? So she came and got me. And the last thing I remember is getting into the car. And she said, when's the last time you ate? I said, I don't know, like 3 days ago, maybe. And she said, okay, you have to eat something. So she went and got a shake. What kind do you like? I said, vanilla. Came back. I said, I'm not hungry. She said, drink the shake. I proceeded to throw up like so many drunks do. And luckily I got out of the car to throw up. And then I got back in the car, and that's the last thing I remember. She said that I was walking and talking as if I were lucid and conscious. And the next thing I know is that scene you just read. I woke up in the rehab having no idea how I got from New York to Florida, where Angela was. She was gone.
Yeah.
And that I had signed some form checking myself in. They'd taken my purse and my emergency stash of drugs in my purse.
Yeah. And so you mentioned a little while ago your sketches. So you're an artist and you were sketching at the time self-portraits. How do you think your painting evolved as you maybe moved through the addiction?
Well, I started having blackouts immediately when I was 12, 13. As soon as I didn't like beer, I didn't like wine, so I wouldn't drink enough of it. But as soon as I realized that I liked Bacardi light rum and that older kids would buy that stuff for us, the gang of bad kids I hung out with.
The gang.
Yeah, they had older siblings we would pool our money and ask for what we wanted, and the older kids would go get it from the deli, and we would hang out in the back of the delis. And so right from the beginning, I was a blackout drunk. And one time to show off maybe, I drank right out of the Bacardi fifth bottle. I fancied myself I'm cool, I'm a rock star, I'm Keith Richards. Like the more I drank, the more I was like somebody.
Animated, yeah.
But I remember drinking the whole thing and then walking home from the party in Manor Haven, an area, and where a lot of the bad kids came from. And I walked past Mill Pond and kept walking. And it was, all I remember is it was so hot. It was winter, dead of winter. I took off my coat and got home and somehow fell asleep in my clothes with my coat on the ground. And my mother woke me up furious. I don't think she even noticed the vomit, or if she did, she didn't say anything. She was furious that she found cigarettes in my pocket. Her older brother smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day, had a heart attack, was told that by his doctors, if he didn't stop right away, he was going to die. He was a painter. I was sure I got my painting skills from him, like genes. I do think that. He was dead by the time I was 5 from a second heart attack because he didn't even cut down. So my mother hated cigarettes, understandably so. It took her brother.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. In my family, Uncle Buddy had a sudden heart attack.
And this is your mom's brother.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And everybody loved him. He was a painter. He supported his loving wife and 3 kids, Brad, Gina, Angela. And Angela is the one who got me to the rehab. They are really important in my life. And Uncle Buddy's paintings were all around my home. There are self-portraits of my mother when I was growing up in Long Island. Now my mother has them in her Manhattan home after my dad died in 2009. She couldn't stand being in the home, of course. It's too big. It reminded her of my dad. So, of course, she got rid of a lot, but not the Uncle Buddy portraits. They're beautiful. And the only thing I wanted from the house in Port Washington was this photo of Uncle Buddy that I now have in my home. It's in that article that you quoted from.
The Fix article.
Yes, I'm a regular contributor to the Fix. They're the largest addiction and recovery website, and I love writing for them. And it's so fun to write about addiction and recovery. And the focus, of course, is on recovery. But that picture was him with Uncle Buddy with a cigarette dangling from his mouth with 2 hands lighting a cigarette. And it's a gorgeous portrait. And that's the only thing I wanted. And my mother many times has asked me, do you think that's why you smoked, because of that painting? And I said, no, it was peer pressure. It was me wanting to be bad. I mean, I loved that painting because I heard so much about the great Uncle Buddy.
Sorry to interrupt you, but that's interesting because, I had Lisa Kirshner on, and she said the same thing about cinema and movies and, sort of this, if you want to be a writer, a serious writer or a serious artist, you need to drink and you need to, that like they go hand in hand. And so it's interesting that you brought that up.
I had a love of the dark side. My mother says that I inherited that from my grandmother, Uncle Buddy's mother, my mother's mother. Oh, and by the way, Buddy's older brother, my mother was the youngest, then Buddy, and they were a big age gap. And then Carl shot himself in the heart, died instantly. And in my family, it's talked about he did that because of a stroke. His stroke happened many years earlier because he was heartbroken at the time. Anyway, so suicide runs in my family, and there is a dark side, believe me. So anyway, but my grandmother loved True Detective, and I got very into Stephen King books. So I got into Go Ask Alice. That was 5th or 6th grade with my best friend, Sue. We would read the same books and talk about them. We even read The Happy Hooker then, and we were like, oh my God, screaming with delight at this craziness. And then, through books and movies, it was, and rock stars more than anything. The only good thing about being the youngest was that I was introduced to music by my older sisters. And they had cool taste in music. And we had tons of records. We had every type of genre. So I learned, the only thing I knew about the Bible was Jesus Christ Superstar. And I still remember all the lyrics. Hair. So I learned an awful lot about things from hair. We saw the first show on Broadway. And so, yeah, I was influenced by lots of things. And I think it was less Uncle Buddy's portrait and more the books I read and the movies I saw. And the time, it was a cultural time, the late 60s, the 70s, it made an imprint, you know? Like my parents, not only was I the youngest, so my parents, I think, were maybe a little tired, but it was also the 70s. It was lax, you know? It was
lax.
Yeah, it was like do your own thing, kind of. You know?
So I want to interrupt for a minute and go back to the drawings, the self-portraits. How do you feel art informed your recovery?
I started blacking out, like I said, at 13, and I kept on blacking out. You know, I blacked out a lot, almost the entire career of like 15 years of drinking and drugging. And when I was high, I just drew and drew and drew. And the artwork was very dark, like hell. And I kind of communicated with myself in those blackouts. I would write Hendrix lyrics, there ain't no life nowhere, you know, suicidal lyrics, like I got to get out of this place. A lot of it was rock lyrics and suicidal tendencies. And I would have screaming heads, like screaming, like Munch, you know, Edvard Munch painted lots of museums in my life. So I knew about Edvard Munch and Hieronymus Bosch and those Hieronymus Bosch. Not everybody knows who he was, but he did a triptych of hell that is so disturbing. Wow. And there have been a lot of memes of Trump within Hieronymus Bosch paintings. And that's a lot, you know, not that I'm as talented as any great artist, but, you know, my favorite artists, dark, like Egon Schiele, Vincent van Gogh, Van Gogh, if you say it right. And I just was free. There was no voice in my head saying anything. It was all like as soon as I had a sip of alcohol or a snort of cocaine, my frontal lobe went into a coma. The frontal lobe is like, oh, honey, you've had enough. Go home, go to sleep. You have a test tomorrow or work tomorrow.
The rational part of your brain,
gone. And what was awakened was like a pinball machine. Bing, 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 like my pleasure centers, you know? Mm-hmm. And I did whatever the fuck I wanted. And so, but it became an interesting like treasure hunt in the mornings to see what I had drawn. One of the absolute most disturbing times was later at 17 after severe car accident where 3 people died. I almost died. I was so angry. People said, well, now you believe in God, right? God saved you. And I would be like, what do you mean? He whacked the other 3? What the fuck are you talking about? And I was angry. And I went back. The year of 16 and 17 is the only year I had been able to get my drug use way down. It was for my loving boyfriend. He was a really good guy. And he was an ex-junkie, the first ex-junkie I ever met. I thought that was the coolest thing. And he wanted me to stop. So I tamped it down a lot. So I came out of that car accident. He was still alive, thank goodness. And I went right into shooting drugs. I broke up with the boyfriend. I went into shooting drugs. And the scariest time.
Yeah. Let's talk about AA and the good things about AA. So then when did you start the recovery journey? How old are you?
Well, when I was 24, I tried. I went to Cocaine Anonymous. I had cocaine, a vial of coke in my pocket. It had one of those screw-off tops with a spoon. Yeah. And I would go into the bathroom, do hits of coke. And I would think, these poor, poor people, they're addicts. Look at them eating those cookies, and they drink coffee after coffee, and they're smoking cigarettes like crazy. It's so ironic now.
Yeah, you just weren't identifying that you were part of the tribe.
I'm at a cocaine meeting snorting coke.
Yeah.
So I would get 7 days together and then I would say, see, I'm not an addict. I knew it. I knew it. And I would go out and I would think, well, last time I did Coke, so this time I'll just drink to celebrate. But in the last couple of years of my sobriety, like 5 years of my sobriety. So I got sober in 88. So the last 5 years of my sobriety, of my drinking career, it was alcohol and drugs were completely linked. As soon as I had a drink, I was on the phone with the deal, getting Coke. As soon as I had a hit of Coke, I was drinking. It was so intertwined. But this happened a few times with Cocaine Anonymous. Then I checked out Alcoholics Anonymous. And each time, every time, like if I got 10 days sober, I thought an addict gets high every day. I haven't gotten high for 10 days. All right, I'm not an addict. I knew it. I knew I'm not an alcoholic. I knew I'm not an addict. And I would go celebrate with drugs and alcohol.
By drinking.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And my last 3-day bender I told you about, that's the one. The last 3-day bender was horrific. And I woke up, all of my drawings, my beautiful paintings, photographed by a professional that I paid, put together painstakingly into a portfolio. And I would trot my portfolio around and go meet with art directors. I ripped it to shreds. That was it. That was the final, you are cuckoo. And I called my cousin.
Yeah. What do you think helped in your recovery journey? I know we talked about the drawing. I think that art is really a powerful medium. I feel like it does draw you inward versus outward, and you could experience emotions and you could reflect on the landscape of your mind in a way that sometimes there are no words for. And so with art, do you feel like you were able to find your tribe in AA, or what did that look like?
Art is a thread all through my life, but so is the Nazi Holocaust. So I didn't know. I was always scared that I was crazy. And I felt things very deeply and nobody understood me. They really didn't. They didn't get that when I said I want to die, I wasn't kidding around. I wasn't bored. I didn't need to just go out and play. I really wanted to die. So at 5 years old, I knew that my dad had a stolen Nazi dagger. It was like a mini sword, very decorative, and it was on the mantle. My mother lost her temper. Look, she was working full time. She had 3 kids. She's a wonderful woman. She gave me a lot of wonderful things, but she lost her temper. I don't know what I did. And I felt so wronged. I decided to kill myself at age 5. And I went and I remembered the chair so vividly that later I asked my mother if my memories were accurate. Did we have those chairs? And she said yes. And they weren't in photos. So I remembered. And I remembered things from when I was 3 in my Manhattan apartment where the faucets looked like Mickey Mouse hands. I have a good memory. So anyway, I dragged the chair over to the mantelpiece. I was so small, I had to go on my tiptoes, and the seat of those chairs was wicker. So it wasn't a hard seat, and it was very topsy-turvy. But I reached up and I got the Nazi dagger and I was going to plunge it into my heart. And I couldn't get the snaps open. I couldn't get the sheath off of the knife. I tried and I tried. Interestingly, when my dad died and we were going through everything, we found those and I tried to open it, and the snap was very hard to open even as an adult. And that's crazy.
How come you went for the Nazi dagger? I know that you've said that you listened to Dad talk about the Holocaust and how he was very passionate about it. What led you there?
I knew it was a weapon. I knew about war. I knew it was a weapon. I knew Nazis were bad. I knew Nazis killed Jews. I knew my father saved me from the Nazis. There was a lot of layers. Plus, the kitchen knives were in the kitchen and my mother was in the kitchen and I stormed out of the kitchen when I couldn't, really, even if I had gotten the snap off as a 5-year-old, I don't know as I could have actually done it.
Right.
Killing yourself is a lot harder than you think. I've jumped in front of a subway train. I've stood on the third rail. I've done a lot of things that I took enough downs in alcohol that I thought would kill a horse. And I just popped up 2 days later, in a hospital. My sister got me there.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're all glad that you didn't die. So thanks for that.
Thank you. I know I've helped a lot of people.
Yeah.
I still think, because I don't believe in God and sin and heaven and hell and all that nonsense, I still think of death as something so peaceful, so restful. No more of my churning, what the Buddhists call monkey mind. I love the Buddhists because it's the God within. So as far as the 11th step in AA, prayer meditation, I'm not for prayer at all. I do like meditation, and I've read a lot about Buddhism, and I love the God within. And what I take that to mean, I'm not speaking for AA. I am not speaking for Buddhists. I am speaking for me, and what has helped me in life in so many ways is all these little bits from all these different parts of life. And with Buddhism, I think of it kind of like Dr. Seuss's When Horton Hears a Who. And there's this teeny little sound in the big elephant, and he hears like a teeny little sound. I feel like I hear common sense when I'm meditating. I hear my inner thoughts. I hear the part that says, no, it's a bad idea to call your ex-boyfriend. No, he's an ex for a reason.
He's an ex for a reason. So as we kind of wrap up here, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your higher power, or what that means for you as a devout atheist Jew.
So I don't have a higher power. Frankly, I love that it just so happens that dog spelled backwards is God.
Yeah.
My first God was Jimi Hendrix. I really thought as a teenager, mixed in with a lot of acid and PCP that we thought was THC and all these hallucinogenics, MMDA, which is now ecstasy is like MDMA or something. There's all these drugs. I was what you call a garbage head.
So tell me a little bit about your higher power and what it means to you.
So Jimi Hendrix was my first higher power, and he remained my higher power well into sobriety. Decades into sobriety. My belief was that Jimi Hendrix was the only person who understood me. Now, keep in mind, I was born in 1961, so I was only 8 when he died September 18th, 1970. I happen to remember. Yeah. Right. And he died of an overdose. And, there's all this thoughts about he choked on his own vomit because they didn't turn him over in the ambulance, whatever. But I did not believe in God. But I guess I believed in ghosts and an afterlife somehow, maybe from movies, maybe from Stephen King, who knows? I had this great poster of Jimi Hendrix with these cables coming out of his head plugged in. You can find it on, if you Google it. And I felt like he was going to come save me, because wherever he was, it was the next world. And I belonged in Jimi Hendrix's world, not here. So when he had lyrics like, I'll meet you on the next world and don't be late, I thought, yeah, I don't belong here. This world is insane. White people hate black people because they're black. Like skin, you know how little bit of skin your body is? It's like this little superficial thing. I have blonde friends, I have red-haired friends, I have black friends. And so that was my first higher power, was Jimi Hendrix. And then after about 2 decades sober, I said to my sponsor, who has been my sponsor the whole time, I said, I just realized that Jimi Hendrix never knew me. I mean, he died in 1970 when I was 8. I didn't hear of him until I was in my early teens. And that's when our relationship started. That's when he became my
higher power.
And she said, it's called an invisible friend in childhood. I said, yeah, like God. And her face changed. Yeah. And she loves me. She knows but I don't, as much as I hate the word God in AA, she just thinks, why does that bother you? It's like, if it's a God of your own understanding, you're just arguing with yourself. And I'm like, because I don't have a God of my own understanding. I had Jimi Hendrix. So now I have dogs. Oh, God.
Now you have dogs.
Yeah, I don't really believe they're all powerful. I don't believe in a deity. But they are the best antidepressants in the entire world. I mean, I'm still a suicidal type. If something goes wrong, I overreact. I go into the depths of despair, and I consider suicide. And what brings me back, I come back much sooner now.
Right.
But when I'm really, really, hopeless, like when I found out Trump was the president, I fall into this pit of despair, and my sponsor calls it an old habit, where I start thinking of methods of suicide. I tried jumping in front of a train. That's a long story. I tried stepping on the third rail twice. Trying to kill yourself is a lot harder than you think. But as soon as I start, I look at my dog. First, it was my puppy, Buddy James. I loved him so. He lived 14 years, and he died at 14 years old. And then I tried to rescue a dog who kept biting me and biting my friends, and I was scared of him, and I tried and tried. And it was my sponsor who helped me through all of that. And she's an AA, she's my AA
And she's
sponsor.
an AA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she knows me better than anybody. And she could see how much I'm going to cry, my romantic relationships ended in disaster. My ex, Steve, I was with for 9 happy years. The first year we were like locking horns, but we had 8 very happy years. And then he relapsed on heroin, and he never came back from that. I think everybody who knows me has been scared at times, but it's no longer an option. I have my dogs. I have my nieces who I adore. I have my mother who's still alive. I have my sponsor who I owe so much to. I just can't even consider it. It crosses my mind. And then just like drinking or drugging crosses my mind a lot. I have to say, can't do it. Just can't do it. And like my sponsor has taught me, put your focus somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Turn your focus. So I watch a movie. It's so funny. You know what relaxes me? Movies about serial killers. I love true crime. I love it. The scarier, the better. Yeah. And that relaxes me. And my dog, snuggling with my dog. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to find happiness wherever you can get it. But I love that you have a AA sponsor. You had the same one for 31. Mm. Yeah.
Oh, just to be honest, at 16 and a half years sober, I was prescribed Vicodin for gum surgery, and it's an opioid. And I had opioids before, and that was when I had foot surgery, and it was no problem. But it was a perfect storm of a breakup of a 5-year relationship, of EMDR and therapy. Do you know what EMDR is?
Yes, eye rapid movement desensitization.
Exactly. Well, it was too much too fast, and I couldn't take it. There were 3 traumas in my life I was not ready to face, and it was just coming at me. And I started buying opioids online. Mm-hmm. This was now going on 15 years ago. And it was, don't get any ideas, alcoholics and addicts. It's not easy anymore, and you get fakes. But at the time, I lined 2 drawers with opioids. And I felt I had to count my days, because even though I wasn't I took some of them for like 2-3 weeks. I said every 4 hours, I could take a painkiller. And I was in a lot of pain. Mm-hmm. So the alcoholic insanity and the drug addict insanity took over, and I relapsed. Yeah. And my ex-husband, he relapsed because he was getting a medical procedure and they prescribed Xanax. So it was...
You have to be careful.
You do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's probably a good place to end. How can people best find you, Dori, and all the awesome work that you do?
Just Google me. I'm all over the web. DORRI And the last name is Olds, Olds, like Oldsmobile, DoryOlds.com. And if you type in Dory Olds, my New York Times personal essay will pop up, all of my fixed masthead, but you got to remember 2 R's.
You do. Yes, you do. Okay. Well, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was great. I hope I helped somebody out there.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. Thanks again. Thank you for listening to the Atheists in Recovery podcast. For more great info and to stay up to date, head over to atheistsandrecovery.com.